They brushed it off as chatter. Said it was all hype. Said Nevaeh would never actually cross that line. And then she did. No build-up. No cushioning. She said it plainly, and the internet went dead quiet, the way a room does when someone says your full name in a serious tone. Because when Nevaeh talks about Blueface, clear, steady, unapologetic, it doesn't read as mess. It feels deliberate. Strategic. Like flipping a switch instead of throwing a tantrum. Within minutes, clips flooded every platform. Notifications spiked. Comment sections split clean in half. And right in the middle of it all sat Stunna, visibly losing her tolerance for the situation. She wasn't watching for entertainment. This wasn't a show she signed up to attend. She was witnessing a real-time unraveling, someone peeling back layers that were never meant to be exposed on camera. Blueface was suddenly trapped in a narrative he didn't control. That timing wasn't accidental. It was disruption on purpose. What made it hit harder was the tone. This wasn't a rant. It wasn't emotion spilling over. It felt like a file finally being opened after being dragged through too many closed doors. Calm voice. Specific details. No rambling. No panic. The kind of delivery that makes typical celebrity drama feel flimsy and performative by comparison. And here's what stopped people cold: no one rushed to shut it down. No immediate denial. No damage control. That silence made it heavier. Something slipped through untouched. No theatrics, no shouting, no shaky camera trying to sell outrage. Nevaeh spoke like someone who had already weighed the fallout and decided it was worth it. Her posture didn't bend. Her focus didn't wander. That wasn't attention-seeking behavior. That was someone finished shielding a situation that no longer deserved protection. She didn't hint. She didn't breadcrumb. She laid it out with precision. Structured. Intentional. The kind of clarity that only comes from replaying the truth in your head over and over until you're no longer afraid of it. She spoke about patterns, not isolated incidents. Systems, not slip-ups. People clocked that immediately. This wasn't emotion, it was history catching up. Blueface's presence loomed over every sentence without needing constant mention. The context spoke loud enough on its own. Each line felt aimed at the past. Fans realized they hadn't understood nearly as much as they thought. That's when the chat stalled, quiet before the eruption. Then everything exploded. Clips circulated live. Screenshots multiplied. Group chats caught fire because Nevaeh wasn't vague. She named power dynamics. She described control disguised as confidence. Loyalty that was expected but never returned. Apologies that went nowhere. Promises that evaporated the moment the cameras turned off. It sounded less like gossip and more like a confidential report that accidentally went public. Then the camera cut to Stunna, and that's where the tension cracked open. You could see it before she reacted. The clenched jaw. The fixed stare. The look that says, this wasn't supposed to happen. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She didn't rush to defend anyone. She couldn't stay. She shifted. She stood up. She walked away, creating distance like someone who knew the structure was about to fall. That exit said more than any online statement ever could. Walking away makes more noise than any argument ever could. It's what people do when something lands too close to home. Viewers picked up on that instantly, because if Nevaeh had been lying, Stunna would have laughed. If it were inflated, there would have been sighs, side eyes, dismissive energy. None of that happened. Instead, Stunna exited, clean, quick, almost surgical. And that's the moment the conversation shifted. People stopped debating whether Nevaeh was telling the truth and started wondering how long it had been buried. Context matters here. Nevaeh isn't an outsider tossing opinions for attention. She isn't a commentator farming engagement. She's someone who's been close enough to see what never makes it to the public timeline. That proximity carries weight. When a voice from inside the circle speaks up, the narrative doesn't wobble, it fractures. People don't torch bridges unless those bridges were already burning underneath them. As she continued, her tone sharpened. Not playful sarcasm, precise, cutting restraint. The kind that doesn't need insults to sting. She never directly attacked Blueface. She didn't have to. She laid out scenarios so clearly that viewers connected the dots themselves. And when the audience reaches the conclusion on its own, it feels undeniable. That's where it gets dangerous. Almost immediately, fans began revisiting old clips, past lives, interviews, jokes that once felt harmless. Under this new lens, things shifted. What had been brushed off as messy or chaotic suddenly looked intentional. The internet loves a rewatch when perspective changes. Meanwhile, Blueface stayed. Invisible. No instant clapback. No emergency live stream. No rushed statement to regain control. Silence like that isn't empty, it's loaded. Questions started stacking up. With every minute he stayed quiet, Nevaeh's words expanded to fill the gap. Absence became implication. What made her credibility harder to shake was her composure. She didn't cry. She didn't spiral. She didn't try to win the chat. She spoke, paused, and let the moment breathe. That's not bluff behavior. That's the posture of someone who already faced the consequences in private. Stunna leaving the frame became a story of its own. Fans replayed the walkout frame by frame. Body language analysts flooded timelines. Threads read like resignation letters dressed up as think pieces. One question echoed everywhere: if this was nothing, why did it feel like everything? Reactions split fast. Some accused Nevaeh of betrayal, insisting certain truths should stay behind closed doors. Others applauded her for saying what everyone else kept skirting around. But even her harshest critics struggled to challenge the facts themselves. They questioned motives, timing, intent, but not accuracy. And that's where the real damage lives. Once credibility takes hold, it doesn't ask for permission. The moment the live ended, the fallout began. Clips broke free from context, and somehow hit even harder. Every repost added a new layer. Every comment turned up the temperature. This wasn't just trending, it was evolving. And at the center stood Blueface, silent, while two women told completely different stories without saying a word. One spoke. One left. Both communicated everything. This wasn't the explosion, it was the siren. The sound that comes right before a structure collapses. Because when something heavy drops and the people closest don't rush to shield it, that's not gossip. That's a reckoning. And the internet felt it. Once Nevaeh's words escaped the live and hit the timeline, there was no slow digestion. The internet inhaled it, choked on it, and immediately demanded more. This is the stage where truth, exaggeration, memes, and outrage get thrown into the same blender, lid off, control gone. Context couldn't keep up. 10-second clips started living entire lives of their own. Stripped of emotion, stripped of delivery, and somehow heavier than the original video ever was. A single sentence hardened into a headline. A brief pause turned into a full-blown theory. The algorithm did what it's built to do, it fed outrage with visibility. Suddenly, Nevaeh's words weren't just circulating, they were being dissected. Interpreted. Repurposed. That's where things get volatile. The memes followed immediately, right on schedule. Calm clips of Nevaeh layered over dramatic film scores, as if she were narrating the collapse of an empire. Freeze frames of Stunna walking out, captioned with lines about truth arriving uninvited. People laughed, but it wasn't carefree laughter. It was the uneasy kind, the kind that slips out when something feels a little too familiar. Then came the industry noise, quiet, indirect, but unmistakable. No names dropped. No tags used. Just perfectly timed posts about knowing when to walk away, protecting peace, and limiting access. The subtweets were deafening. Everyone understood the target without it ever being named. That was the moment it became clear, this wasn't just internet chatter anymore. The situation had reached industry consciousness. And still, Blueface said nothing. By this point, the silence felt less calculated and more combustible. Each unanswered minute stretched the narrative wider. Fans stopped wondering when he would respond and started asking why he hadn't. Was he regrouping? Lawyering up? Shocked? Or simply hoping the chaos would burn itself out on its own? At the same time, Stunna's reaction quietly became the emotional core of the stage. People didn't just see her leave, they interpreted it. Some said she couldn't stand to hear the truth spoken aloud. Others believed she already knew and didn't want her face attached to confirmation. A few argued she was protecting herself from being pulled into damage she didn't create. No matter the angle, one thing was consistent, that exit was read as intentional. And in the court of public opinion, intention often passes for proof. Nevaeh, meanwhile, went silent. No victory lap. No follow-up live. No clarifications or explanations. And that silence landed very differently from Blueface. Hers felt complete, like she'd said what needed to be said and had no interest in persuading anyone. That restraint only amplified her credibility. When someone doesn't chase validation, their words tend to grow heavier with time. Public reaction didn't fade, it fractured. One side framed Nevaeh as someone finally breaking a cycle, exposing behavior that had been excused for far too long. The other accused her of airing private matters and triggering damage that couldn't be reversed. But even among critics, something was telling. Most people debated whether she should have spoken, not whether she was telling the truth. That distinction quietly shifted the balance. Pop culture comparisons ran wild. Some said it felt like a reality show where the writers walked out and everyone was forced to improvise their trauma in real time. Others joked that it made celebrity love triangles look like amateur theater, overacted, dramatic, but still impossible to look away. The sarcasm was loud, exaggerated, and sometimes theatrical, but underneath it all sat a tension that wasn't playful at all. This didn't feel staged. It didn't feel like a rollout, a teaser, or a calculated leak designed to juice engagement. It felt premature, like something escaped before the cleanup crew could arrive. Before managers, lawyers, and PR teams had a chance to sand down the edges. And that's what unsettled people. When something feels unplanned, audiences listen harder. They start reading between lines that may not even exist. Old footage resurfaced almost instantly, but not quietly. It returned with new captions, new edits, new music, and a completely different emotional charge. Clips that were once treated as jokes or chaotic entertainment suddenly felt tense, even uncomfortable. Interviews once labeled playful started to sound sharp, as if laughter had been masking something darker. Jokes people used to dismiss began to feel pointed, even cruel, when replayed through a new lens. The internet has always loved rewriting history when new context appears. This time, it did it with speed and enthusiasm. Nevaeh didn't just give people a moment, she handed them a pen. And the rewrite came fast. Nothing remained untouched. Even moments unrelated to her claims were pulled into the conversation, stitched together by implication rather than evidence. A glance. A pause. A shift in tone from an old clip suddenly became proof of something deeper. Patterns were identified, challenged, reassembled, and challenged again. Footage was slowed down frame by frame. Quotes were stripped of context. Long threads stacked unrelated moments until they felt convincing simply because of their length. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds, not over facts, but over loyalty. And that distinction mattered. The debate wasn't about what could be proven anymore. It was about who people believed deserved protection. Questions surfaced that had no easy answers. Who owes silence to whom? When does privacy turn into complicity? Who waited too long to speak, and who spoke too soon? Where did the power sit in these dynamics, and who absorbed the damage quietly while attention stayed elsewhere? The conversation began drifting beyond Blueface altogether. It widened into something more uncomfortable, about power, fame, and how chaos often gets protected when it's dressed up as love, passion, or just how they are. People weren't just reacting to one situation anymore. They were recognizing patterns they'd seen over and over again. As that shift took hold, pressure started showing in subtle ways. Fewer public interactions. Quieter movements. Small behavioral changes that meant little on their own but spoke volumes together. When the noise gets this loud, even silence starts communicating, and this silence wasn't empty. Support became harder to spot. The usually vocal defenders, the ones quick to joke, distract, or derail, grew noticeably quieter. Fewer bold declarations. Fewer ride-or-die comments. Fewer posts pretending nothing was happening. In online culture, that kind of quiet from supporters speaks louder than criticism ever could. It signals hesitation. Distance. A shift that doesn't need an announcement. By the end of this phase, the story had grown far beyond the original moment. It was no longer about one statement or one viral clip. It became about behavior. Who stayed visible? Who disappeared? Who kept posting as usual? Who slowed down? Who spoke? Who deflected? Who went silent? And once behavior becomes the narrative, explanations rarely catch up. Words can be clarified. Absence, delay, and selective engagement are much harder to explain away. This wasn't escalation for entertainment. It was escalation because something fundamental felt cracked, something humor and noise could no longer smooth over. Once a fracture appears, nothing that follows makes it smaller. It only spreads. Every hour without clarity adds pressure. Every vague post invites another layer of interpretation. And when the noise finally drops, when the timeline scrolls on to the next spectacle, what's left behind isn't relief. It's residue. This is the stage of a scandal that doesn't scream but lasts the longest. Reputations don't always collapse in one viral explosion. More often, they wear down slowly in public, eroded by doubt that piles up quietly. And once that erosion sets in, no amount of image management restores the original shine. Blueface didn't lose the internet in a single moment. He lost it increment by increment. Every silent hour after Nevaeh's statement shaved off another piece, not because people were demanding answers, but because they stopped expecting them. That shift is deadly in the attention economy. Expectation keeps someone relevant, even under pressure. When expectation disappears, relevance drains away softly. No outrage. No hashtags. Just scrolling past. No more arguing in comment sections that once felt charged. What made this phase hit harder was how long chaos had been normalized. Volatility wasn't a flaw, it was part of the brand. Drama passed as entertainment. Dysfunction was reframed as authenticity. But once an invisible line is crossed, the same behavior stops feeling edgy and starts feeling exhausting. The audience didn't just feel surprised. They felt worn out. Tired of defending. Tired of explaining. Tired of justifying behavior they wouldn't tolerate in their own lives. And when exhaustion sets in, loyalty thins quickly. The narrative quietly shifted. It stopped being about what happened and turned into why this keeps happening. That pivot is dangerous for any public figure. It redirects attention away from isolated incidents and toward patterns, character, and long-term accountability. Once the conversation becomes systemic, quick fixes lose power. Apologies feel scripted. Silence feels calculated. Even humor lands wrong, like cracking jokes in a room that's already gone still. With certainty unavailable, the internet did what it always does, it filled the gaps. Theories multiplied. Motives were assigned. Timelines were reconstructed with confidence that far exceeded the actual facts. And yet, even people who admitted they didn't know everything still chose sides. Because this was never only about truth. It was about identification. People recognized pieces of their own stories, past relationships, power imbalances, moments they stayed silent too long or wished someone else had spoken sooner. The situation became a mirror, and mirrors are hard to ignore. As days passed, urgency faded, but impact deepened. This is where scandals do their quietest work. Not in the explosive first wave, but in the aftermath where every future move is filtered through memory. New projects land colder. Old fans hesitate before sharing. Neutral observers default to skepticism. The benefit of the doubt, once gone, rarely returns in full. What lingered most wasn't anger. It was disappointment layered with uncertainty. Anger burns fast and bright. Disappointment settles in and stays. It changes tone. It reshapes patience. It narrows how much grace people are willing to offer. And it doesn't announce itself, it just becomes the new background hum. By the time the timeline fully moved on, something had clearly shifted. Not in metrics alone, but in energy. In the absence of excitement where chaos-fueled curiosity once lived. There was no clean ending. No satisfying resolution. The story simply folded itself into collective memory, another reference point people would later mention with a sigh and a quiet, remember when. That's what lasts. Not the clips. Not the arguments. The recalibration. Once perception shifts, everything that follows is viewed through it. Silence feels louder. Actions feel heavier. And the space where trust once existed stays noticeably empty, even when the noise dies down. The audience moved from asking what's his side? To of course he won't say anything. Defense stopped being the focus. Pattern took over. Old clips gained footnotes. Confidence began reading as control. Jokes felt like deflection. Chaos stopped looking like personality and started looking like strategy. Context is ruthless, and Nevaeh's words handed it a sharper blade. Stunna's reaction aged in real time. The walk-off stopped being a moment and became a marker. Each time a new clip surfaced, fans brought it back like a silent witness. Remember when she left turned into shorthand for everything that was never said. That's the power of exits. They don't argue. They conclude. And Stunna didn't rush to soften it. No follow-up explanations. No defensive posts. No claims that people were reading too much into it. That absence solidified the symbolism. Intentional or not, the internet framed her exit as self-preservation in motion, a boundary drawn without ink. Nevaeh's role crystallized into something